for joining us again for our weekly conclave. And today, our conclave focuses around um, psilomethoxin and its origin and some of the science around how this synthesis or biosynthesis is even possible. Just before we dive into this important topic, I wanted to just share a few highlights around what we have upcoming. So on November 23rd, we have our monthly ceremony. This month is it's entitled the Unity Ceremony, and we're very excited to once again be bringing you some beautiful collaboration, sound, breath work, movement, and a guided transformational journey. And we really hope that you'll join us and continue to evolve along this path alongside us. And so, yeah. And with that being said, I want to also just take a moment to say thank you so much for trusting us this far. If you've been following along with the work we've been doing, and this is just even recently, as in the past several months, starting in several months ago when we started bringing these conclaves to you, and we really appreciate that. And our biggest intention is to continue to provide you with education and community and access so that you may deepen your relationship to yourself and this beautiful reality that we call life. So thank you so much just for being on this path with us. And yeah, so I want to just give you a short highlight about what we'll be discussing today. Again, the origins of psilomethoxin and why this is such an important path to follow, and why we're still continuing to explore and expand along this path with you. So we'll talk a little about how psilocybe mushrooms produce psilocin, and most commonly known as psilocybin, which is the prodrug for psilocin, and how and who brought forward the idea of introducing tryptamines into the growing medium of mushrooms, and how they can actually utilize those compounds to make something new. One of the important people that we'll discuss is Joachim Gartz. He is a scientist that first discovered and created the way to do this. So we use his science essentially in our creation or production of these things, and then talk about some ethics around the bringing these things forward. So without further ado, I'll dive right in. Thank you so much again for joining us. So how psilocin is made in the mushroom, and what is the mushroom even doing? And so there are enzymes. So enzymes are these like pre-protein structures that enable compounds to be attached or added to molecules to change their structure. So think like hydrogen and oxygen, and enzymes can create water, right? Put them together, sort of like in different ways. Your liver has enzymes in it which enable you to make different things like glucose or and other nutrients that you may need and not have. Your liver can actually make them by doing a chemical process inside your body. So very interesting structure of compounds. And so there's a few important enzymes that are in mushrooms. One is called PSIH, which it is basically a hydroxylase enzyme, and that is what enables the mushrooms to put a hydroxyl group on a particular molecule. And then there is a PSIK, which is a phosphorylation enzyme, which that enables that compound to be phosphorylated, which both of those are important in the psilocin process or psilocybin process, and I'll get to that in a moment. And then there's a PSIM, which is a methylation enzyme, and that adds nitrogen to the molecule. And then there's a PSID, which is a decarboxylation enzyme, and that actually removes the carboxylation or the carboxyl group from the molecule. And why this is important is because psilocybe mushrooms, in order to grow them, they require tryptophan, which is the pre molecule. And actually, tryptophan is one of the essential amino acids that are so important to human life. We don't make that compound, but it is required in our process to make melatonin and serotonin in our brains. So we must consume tryptophan in order to survive. And so these mushrooms are so beautiful because they use tryptophan to make these important compounds that actually help humans to have a better life. And just a small sidebar, what they've discovered now is that psilocin containing mushrooms actually extend the lifespan of human cells and reduce the aging of human cells. So some fascinating research coming out live around these things. So why those enzymes are important is because when mushrooms take tryptophan, which is 5-HT, 5-hydroxytryptophan, they begin to convert that tryptophan into first tryptamine and then into psilocin or psilocybin. And so psilocin or tryptamine is converted into psilocin first, or psilocybin. Well, I wouldn't say first, but in like a cyclical process. It's happening all like in a way to balance the one or the other, and whatever the mushroom decides it wants to have as far as the composition goes. Now, I'm sure you've seen different tests where there's different levels, and that's just because different mushrooms are living organisms, and they have different needs and different wants to have different concentrations of these different compounds. So if the mushroom decides it has too much psilocin, then it will phosphorylate those psilocin molecules, and then you'll get psilocybin. And if the psilocybin gets too high, it can actually remove the phosphoryl group from the mushroom, and then it will increase the hydroxyl concentration and reduce the phosphorylation. Excuse me, phosphoryl group concentration, and you'll have a higher psilocin concentration within the mushroom. And this is a constant dance that's happening all the time in that living mushroom body. And it's really it's a biochemical conversion system. So it's just always happening. And what they have discovered through the path is that there can be things added to the mushroom to the growing medium to sort of kickstart the process. And before I get into that, I wanted to mention that the importance of actual psilomethoxin, or 5-MeO or 4-HO 5-MeO DMT, which this compound was discovered and synthesized in 1965 by Mark Julia at the Pasteur Institute. And I've got his paper that he created a sort of a research flow as he was building all these different lines of compounds that started with tryptophan and moved through all these different synthesis pathways just to discover what was possible. And in the writing, he mentioned making it and that it oxidizes immediately. It's a very, very volatile substance. So they didn't do anything with it since the 60s. It kind of was, I wouldn't want to say shelved, because there was no intention that we know to actually produce it, but the path of it creating it wasn't followed. And so enter Joachim Gartz in the 80s, where he had a theory that if you added a tryptamine to the medium of mushrooms, then you could sort of, I don't want to say infuse, but you could jump forward in the synthesis process and enable the mushroom to actually take that tryptamine compound into it and hydroxylate it or phosphoxylate it. So it would enable the mushroom to actually make something new, and typically make something that is more orally bioavailable, because in our human gut we have monoamine oxidase. So monoamine oxidase, it helps us break things down that could potentially be toxic to us, or we could have too much of, so it could cause imbalances. And so it breaks these things down, and in order to orally absorb these compounds, we have to add either a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, so that would inhibit our body from, or our monoamine oxidase from breaking these compounds down, or the compound themselves can be tweaked to sort of defend against the monoamine oxidase from breaking the compound down. And that's what the hydroxyl group does in the mushroom. Or the phosphoryl group, which the phosphoryl group actually gets broken off when it goes into your stomach and hits the stomach acid. So what Joe Kingartz found, that he decided he wanted to add diethyltryptamine, or DET, to psilocybe mushroom substrates. And he actually has written a peer-reviewed, published article on this, and has a patent around this that shows all of the workings of how this process happens, and that he actually successfully produced 4-HO-DET by adding that to the growing medium of mushrooms. So very fascinating. If you want to dive into some of the research on that, you can type Joe Kingartz. It's JOCHENGARTZ if you want to Google it, and it'll be in the description as well. Just do some light looking around on this. There is some very fascinating articles in PubMed that will provide some support around that process. And why is that important? Well, because since the 80s and moving forward in time, that research seemed to kind of get swept under the rug. And we all know that there is pharmaceutical interests in synthetics. It's a very simple process for people, and it's very difficult for us humans to use to bring medicine to ourselves. So there's no profit motive to keep those things alive and in circulation. So they kind of went away with his path. And so fast forward to mid 2000s, and there was a conversation that was being had between Sasha Shulgin, who many of you may know, many of you may not, and I would invite you to do some research around who Sasha Shulgin is, but a very important figure in the reemergence of MDMA, 2CB, and some other psychedelic compounds. So very, very important person. And so in that flow, in the mid 2000s, there was a conversation being had where Sasha had mentioned that he believed that if you added 5-MeO-DMT to the substrate, essentially, of psilocybe mushrooms, that those mushrooms would take up that 5-MeO-DMT and produce a new compound, or I'll say a new compound, but a compound that had been found before, which was psilomethoxin, or 4-HO-5-MeO-DMT, or So what happens? Has that ever been done? Well, there are some, I want to say, like unconfirmed reports that it had been done, and there was reasons why there was no real mention of any processes that had undergone after Sasha had been raided by the government. So completely, totally want to respect and sanctify his work and say thank you to what he's done, because the government puts pressure on people that were in that science channel at some points, and created resistance. So it made an environment where people were afraid to do research or speak about it. So with that being said, where did psilomethoxin come from, and why in the current iteration? Well, in 2021, Ian Benwies was just really diving into how to bring forward 5-MeO DMT to veterans. Well, everyone, but we'll just say veterans was the focus in the short term for healing. And how can you bring it to, how could we get it to them orally in a low dose formulation? Previously, we were working with veterans and other individuals in a ceremonial setting with 5-MeO DMT. And as any of you who have worked with 5-MeO DMT could attest to, it is a very rapid and very intense experience, which oftentimes leaves participants with limited information on return. And when it comes to psychedelic experiences, oftentimes the experience can provide so much nourishing insight into some of the things that we decide we'd like to work on or see or observe or let go of. Even though there's some, yeah. Anyway, so with that being said, the approach, the conversation around how do we orally deliver a low dose formulation of 5-MeO DMT and help people to move through experiences with a much more living, integrative process. And so instead of having to do this like these massive meetings of integration, like invite people into a place where they could be actively integrating the experience, using these in, let's say, like one-to-one or group settings where people could have active conversations around things that they're working with and moving through, and soften the ego and enable the energy of the flow, the spirit to come through that. And so he had a close friend who was also working with psilocybin mushrooms in a ceremonial way, add 5-MeO DMT to the substrate of the mushrooms following Joe Kingart's formula. And what we found was that these mushrooms provided a very unique experience. And I can still remember the first time the first time I collaborated with him, and he offered to share these mushrooms with me. And these mushrooms, I had been working with mushrooms for a number of years, regularly, literally monthly, and sometimes more than monthly, twice a month. So I had a very vivid and real experience with how the mushroom experience went, what it looked like, what it felt like. So I of course, I'm like, I say yes. I took these mushrooms, and together we just started chatting, and it was amazing the clarity that came through, the flow state that we just dropped into. It was like, whew, wow, this was amazing. So immediately we decided this is something that we need to invite other people to experience, just to test out if this is something that is effective. And I believed at the time, and we discussed this deeply, that we wanted to follow in the lineage of medicine people of old, right? And when a medicine person would venture into nature and find a plant, or they would be passed down the knowledge of plants that would help certain ailments and neurosis, they would use these plants, and they wouldn't necessarily go through some arduous process of like cutting and pulling and extracting the compounds and before it worked. If it worked, they used it. So we went forward with that and started sharing it with veterans that we were very connected with, that had worked with psychedelics ad nauseum and had experience, so we could get honest feedback. We also shared it with many people in the 5-MeO community who were very experienced practitioners, many of which you probably know, but I'm not going to name out of respect for their own intentions, but many that you already probably know, and who provided beautiful review and response to our mushrooms that gave us some some security in our belief, one of which is Dr. Martin Ball, who we will actually have on a conclave here in a few weeks. Very excited about that conversation. And he's actually done a YouTube live, or YouTube, how do you call it? He covered himself taking the Psilomethoxin and going through an experience, and he documented the whole thing. And so I would invite you to find that and look at that. And if I can find it, I'll put it in the description here, so it's easy click over to review. But it provided such a unique experience, we just kept going with it. And in 2022, we decided that we had done enough testing that the Church of the Sacred Synthesis was going to bring this forward in a spiritual way to help people reconnect to their inner spirit, the part of them that may have been lost, which we all know that part of that connection can create so much suffering. So as time went on, we continued to share these mushrooms and worked with them in ceremonial ways, and primarily the main delivery method is through microdosing. That's how we recommend it. It provides such a stable and clear support structure around the process and around everyday use without artifacts, in contrast to psilocybin, which can oftentimes provide visual or audio artifacts. Artifacts meaning like hallucinations or things that like breathing walls or waves in the body. This Psilomethoxin seems to provide much more clarity along the lines of use. And so as we moved forward in time and as we are arriving here now, we are continuing to share these mushrooms with the spiritual community, with people who desire to connect and expand their consciousness, and help to ease some of the suffering that's here in the physical world by helping people connect with their spirit, with their source right here. I'm not in this guy, but inside of there. And so the invitation is here to give yourself a try. If you're interested in exploring these, the church is grateful to provide that and education and support around your experience and your expansion. And we really appreciate all of you joining us for this path that we've been on. It's been quite an honor to continue to serve you in many different capacities. And so I'll just end this discussion with a reminder that we are going to be continuing to bring you conclaves weekly and have very interesting conversations around all the different aspects of ceremony, medicine, energy, and our monthly Heroes Dose, which brings a powerful conversation forward on interesting, unique topics that aren't highlighted in the other three that you bring forward to us. And so this is an invitation for you, if you have something that you want to discuss, or if you want to speak to us, if you have wisdom in an area that you'd like to share, please reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation with you, and we're going to start exploring having people on so we can talk to them as well. So thank you so much for joining me today in this highlighted conversation around the origins of Psilomethoxin, and please stay tuned to what we have in store, and join us and consider joining us on November 23rd for our Unity ceremony. All the details will be in the description. If they're not already, they'll be edited and added as time goes on. So just stay tuned and click the subscribe if that feels good to you, and continue to receive the updates as we present them. So thank you, everyone, and love you.